Welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and inside this game overview and gameplay video, I am very excited to be showing you Dieson Crusoe coming from Best with One Games. This is part of their solo game of the month, and it is for the month of February, as this will be releasing on GameFound for February 13th. Now, if you haven't checked out my prototype unboxing, which are released recently, I'll put it in the top right-hand corner so you can see everything that came as part of the prototype. Of course, the final version will have things all squared away when it goes out the door, but if you want to know more about the solo game of the month and how it operates, I've got that in the video description and pinned comment for you. But the purpose of this video is to show you how this game sets up, what it takes to get the game going, and of course playing the game itself and how it flows and operates. So I'm going to do all of this. We'll find out more about it to help you make an informed decision as to whether or not Dieson Crusoe is for you. This is a solo game, and it takes 30 to 60 minutes to play. Of course, with a name like Dieson Crusoe, you're going to be shipwrecked and stranded. You must outwit, outlast, and overcome the dangers of the mysterious island to escape its clutches in this thrilling dice placement game. So the major mechanism inside the game is dice placement. You'll be manipulating the dice, choosing actions with the dice, and using them to try to survive. I'm going to show you how this game sets up. Let's move to that right now, and then we'll get right into gameplay. Now, this solo game is a small footprint on the table, so when you're setting things up, you can follow the rulebook exactly as it depicts in the setup instructions, or you can modify it to your liking. In my case here, I've set up these two boards horizontally to make it easier for you guys to see how things are flowing versus a vertical setup as it shows in the rulebook currently. Next, we placed a meeple, which represents us, of course, and that's going to start right here where you can see the meeple inside of a circle with a dotted line. And then down here, we'll also be placing a disc in the day one position. Once these are in place, look inside the game box for cards with a back that says area and a signpost. Grab these cards, place them face down in a stack next to this board. Now it's time to become familiar with your surrounding scenes. You're starting on the edge of an island, and you're going to take a look at the island up close and notice that it is divided by white dotted lines, signifying different areas of the island, and there's a signpost in each of them depicting what creatures can be found there. As you can see in the section we're currently in, the dividing line showing right here, a faint dotted line, it is rabbits. So we need to find the rabbit card from the area deck that we just put together, and we'll place that face up next to the game board. So as we traverse throughout the island over time, again, depending on which quests we select, because some will take longer than others, but as we move through the island, we'll go into different areas, which will result in different area cards, which will tell us what creatures are in those areas that we can either hunt or which will potentially come after us. And speaking of quests, there are 5 of them inside the box. You can, of course, pick one of these and play them as a one-shot, or you can start from quest number 1 and work your way through all the quests one at a time to go from surviving to an SOS to taming to fighting and then finally to escaping. We're going to choose to dive into the action at quest number 1 called Survive. As it states right on it, gives you the objectives we're going after. In order to win and survive, we need to hunt a deer and we need to make a rope. And also remember, across each of those quests, you'll have varying levels of time in order to complete this. We put a disc on the day track, which you can see off to the left here, and at the very bottom of the quest card, it'll tell you how many days you have in order to complete these objectives to win the game. It's worth mentioning that the setup instructions always give you recommendations when you're a brand new player as to what cards you should be selecting. I'm following that for this video. However, when you get the game, you'll be able to mix and match difficulty levels by increasing the difficulty as well as going after higher level quests from 2 to 5, which will increase the number of days you have to accomplish specific objectives. And those objectives, of course, will be tougher to survive through. The game does come with a number of tool cards, and some of these will not be used in the very first play, as you'll only be specifically grabbing certain ones as depicted by setup, and so these ones will be taken out of the equation. So for our very first game, we have the 4 recommended that we can potentially craft. We have the basket, the bed, the stone knife, and the rope. Now let's choose our character. We have the craftsman, the pathfinder, and the hunter, and the best things about each of these can be found at the bottom of each of the cards, and they relate to what they're called. So the craftsman's great at building things, the pathfinder's great at moving around, discovering things, and the hunter is great at fighting, of course. If you wish to increase the difficulty of the game, one way is to flip over your character card and start with 4 health rather than 5. It's recommended to start with 5 for your very first game. And out of the 3 choices you have, it's recommended to go with the hunter. The next thing to do is to choose a friend card, and these friend cards will be orientated vertically, but I just want to show you all 5 of them here on screen. We have Jack, Tom, Wednesday, Bilson, and also Stitch, each one of them focusing on a resource or some element of the gameplay that's a benefit, so long as you can increase your friendship with that friend as you go along through your adventure. So choosing one of these is up to you, or you can take the recommended one, which in this case is the green one, Jack. And Jack's very good at providing you wood over time, so long as you increase your relationship with him. As you can see, he is in green, and you place a disc in the starting position. We'll talk more about how this works later on. Next, we're going to place a disc on the dotted circle of the event track, and you can see the event track is right here. It goes around in a circle, and the disc right here at the very top of this dotted circle is where the disc goes. And also on the exact same board, in the top right, you're going to see the action track, which is this right here going around in a circle. And you'll see a meeple up here at the very top position. Place one meeple in that starting space. Next up, place the 3 yellow dice on each of the 3 boxes marked with lightning, weather, and raid icon. All the dice values should be 1. Next, we need to populate our house with a number of resources equal to our health. Our health is 5 hearts, so we're going to place a purple cube in here. I'm going to use the purple cubes to represent 5 yellow cubes. And you'll also start the game off with 2 food, which you'll place inside of an area depicted with the food icon. You also have fur, you have stone, and wood. You'll be keeping your resources in these areas, and there's icons depicting what they can do. We'll talk about those when we get into gameplay. So you're going to take the 2 yellow dice and 1 gray die. You're going to have these to roll when you start the very first turn. In the top right, I've also placed all the rest of the cubes, and they are inside of a game tray. That game tray does not come as part of the final product of this one. And there is a die in that one, which will be a blue color, which will end up on the blueprint card, which is another tool you can craft. Now, again, one thing to mention is inside the tutorial, it's going to tell you to use only 4 cards for quest number 1. You can also choose to replay this, again, as I mentioned, increasing the difficulty by flipping the card over and having less health, and also adding in all the other tools you can potentially craft to increase the amount of different strategies you can try to use. We are now more than ready to dive into gameplay, but first, for those that didn't watch the setup portion of this video, let's talk about the overarching goal of the game in terms of win and loss conditions. So, to lose a game of Dieson Crusoe, you can have your health be depleted all the way to the point you have nothing left. If that happens, we start with 5, we get down to 0, we have not survived, and we lost the game. The other way we can lose is based on the quest card. It'll tell us how many days we have to finish the requirements on the card, and if we go to that end of day and we have not completed or satisfied those requirements, we have also lost. So in order to win, we look at the quest card. It tells us to hunt a deer and make a rope. We don't have to do these sequentially. We can actually craft the rope first and then hunt the deer after, or vice versa, but we have to have both of those done within 6 days, as the card states. The game is divided into 3 major phases. You have the morning phase where you roll dice and move the event disc. You have the afternoon phase where you take 3 actions based on your rolled dice. And the evening is when you have meal, weather, raid, move the action dice, and advance the date disc. So as you can see at the very top left-hand corner of this board, you have the morning icon. It has 3 slots beside it, and you're going to place the 3 dice we're about to roll, which came from the center here, the gray and 2 yellow, to start things off. We're going to slot them in ascending order from left to right. All right, let's see how we do on this very first roll. This will depict some things. We got ourselves a 6, a 4, and a 2. The 3 dice are now sitting in the slots up top, left to right. We have a very even roll from 2 to 6. And then at this point, if we want, we can choose to re-roll 1, 2, or 3 of the dice if we want by spending 1 stone from our resource pool over here. You'll see the icon of dice with a rotating arrow, letting us know and reminding us we can spend stone multiple times to re-roll these dice if they don't fit our needs. The next thing we do is we move the event disc, which is just below where we seated our dice. Now this disc is going to move based on the number in the leftmost position, which currently is 2. And you'll see the reminder that we moved the disc is right in the actual slot itself, showing the disc moving. So it's 2. We're going to move this disc clockwise 2 positions. Now before I move the disc, let's talk about the event track and the different icons we can see. So first off, we see a food icon here. If we move disc from 1 space, it's going to give us 1 food down here, giving us a total of 3. We're going to be going 2 spaces. We'll land here, giving us a choice between either wood or stone, and those will go resource-wise into the corresponding slot. The next one here, if it lands here, is going to give us a +2 on the raid die. That corresponds to the icon right here, which means this increases and gives us a higher chance of having a raid happen later on at night. Not good. The next one here has food being consumed on us. That is definitely bad. This one right here has the friend disc, which is down here off screen, moving along the track. We'll talk more about that later. This one here is going to have a fence and roof impact, which is not good. That is right here and here, where you can build up fences and roofs. And then, of course, if those start deteriorating, you are going to be in trouble in terms of your health. Again, we'll talk more about that later on. And then the final one here is a +2 on the weather die, which happens to be right here. As this die increases in value, it potentially gets rainier or a lot colder, and bad things can happen from that. So after moving the event disc 2 spaces based on the leftmost die, we landed on a spot with a choice. I've chosen wood and placed that wood resource right here. We now move from the morning phase to the afternoon phase. You'll see that denoted on the track going from morning to afternoon, and this is the action track right here. Now, unlike the morning phase, where days starting off begin with a wrench being thrown at you in some cases, and in other cases you might actually gain some things that are beneficial, like we did with some wood, but when we move to the afternoon, the purpose of the afternoon is to be busy on the island, to use actions to try to complete various tasks to move us towards a quest win. So what we have here is a number of actions going around in a circle, and there's particular movement that occurs based on spending an unused die. An unused die is one of the three that's set up here in the very top left. Now, the moment we go ahead and select one of those unused die, we take a look at the value of the die itself, and it's going to let us know how much we can move the meeple around the track. And you're always going to be moving in a clockwise position unless you rolled a 1 or you have a gray die. If you have a 1, you can go clockwise or counterclockwise. If you have a gray die, you can go clockwise or counterclockwise. But if you have a value on a yellow die from 2 to 6, you always have to move clockwise around this thing. So you have to keep that in mind in terms of once you use one die, the meeple is going to move that many positions in that certain direction you've chosen, and then after that, use the next die, and the meeple will move from that position to the next one. So thinking ahead about which actions you want to take is very important. One thing always worth doing is keeping your eyes on what you're trying to accomplish. So in this quest, we're trying to craft a rope. We're also trying to find a deer and hunt it. So in order to find a deer, you'll see if we take a look at the island over here, we're in the very first section of this island. There's a small dotted line right here. So the very first 2 positions are going to be us hunting rabbits. If we want to get to the deer, we're going to have to make it all the way out to at least here to be able to try and hunt a deer. So that's worth keeping in mind in terms of the top requirements of this card. The making of a rope right here tells us the requirements we're going to need in order to craft one. We're going to need not only the ability to craft, we need 3 stars, and we need various resources, 1 food, 2 wood, and 2 fur. Now, in terms of the resources, food, wood, and fur, most of them are pretty obvious in terms of how you would accomplish them. We'll talk more about some of them in case they're not obvious at this point a little later on. But let's focus on the stars, because stars don't really inherently tell you exactly how that is accomplished, but the actual table in the middle of the action track does tell you. So when you choose an unspent die during the afternoon to use for its value on it to determine how you're going to move your meeple to do an action, you're also in turn going to check this middle section to see how many stars you're going to get during that time frame. That's going to become a multiplier in most cases when you're doing a specific action around here. You're going to see stars depicted all over the place. So for instance, if I happen to use a 2 here as my spent one, a 2 will give me 1 star. And when I use this die, it's going to allow me to move the meeple 2, and it's a yellow one, so I can only move clockwise. I'd move to this position, I would say, hey, that's stone, stone times stars. Well, the star was 1, so 2 times 1 means I get 2 stone, and that drops right here into my reserve. Now, before I officially take an action, let's go through each of the different action slots and what they do, just so you have an appreciation for how you can use them. This one right here, very similar to what we did with the event deck, where we moved into space with a line dividing it, letting us know we can choose one or the other. In this case, we have an option between food, wood, and stone, so very nice. The next one, if we move 2, is going to allow us, based on the value of our die, we get a certain number of stars, and that value of stars is times by stone, which gives us a bunch of stones. So if we happen to get 3 stars, and we're going after stone, we're going to get 3 stone. Pretty awesome. Then down here, this one allows us to transfer stone and wood by combining them together in order to build fences. Very handy. We'll talk more about that later on. This one here is for gathering wood, of course, again, dependent on stars. This one here is for going hunting, and it's all about having your power, total power, times the number of stars when you go hunting, and that's going to factor in when you're going up against those wonderful rabbits in the woods where we currently are. And this one here allows us to trade in fur and wood, combining those in order to increase our roof, to expand the roof over our heads, which is going to help us in situations where we have to deal with weather and other horrible effects that are going to come after us. And then this one here is going to give us the ability to heal, which is great. And this one has us going after food, primarily, again, based on the number of stars. Now, as you know, I have a 2, 4, and a 6 up top. Let's say, hypothetically, for some reason, I really wanted to move 3 spaces rather than just 2. In order to do this, you can mitigate the dice roll by going ahead and spending 1 of your health in order to move your meeple an additional space adjacent to where you would have been, or you can actually burn wood, the resource, in order to move an additional space. And you can do this as many times as you wish. Of course, if you run out of health, well, you lose the game, so try and avoid that. And burning all your wood isn't obviously the best decision in all cases either. Let's go ahead and start off our afternoon. The very first thing we do, choosing 1 unused action die and moving the meeple. I've chosen to use the gray die to start. I can go clockwise or counterclockwise with the gray die. I chose to go counterclockwise. So we started here. We went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're also probably wondering what this action does. This one is about movement on the actual island itself. You'll see this as I'll want to do this later on as well. So I went 6 all the way around and I didn't reach where I wanted to go, which is the stones. And you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, why didn't you just use the 2 yellow die and just move from here to here? Well, again, remember the value. The value of the die that you choose to use corresponds to how many stars you get, and you want to make sure that when you get into the action slot you may want to use, you have enough stars to get the benefits you're going after. Now, I was short getting to the stone action slot, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn some wood here in order to allow me to move my meeple. You'll see that a modifier right here showing a meeple going left or right. So we're going to go ahead and move one adjacent space right here. We get to take the fact that this is a 6 die, and you'll see once I use one of these 3 dice up top, I move it to the first number 1 slot right here. There's a number 2 and then a number 3, and that's going to matter for later effects during night. We'll talk about that later on. But here we got a 6, which is 3 stars, 3 times the actual resource itself is 3 stone, so we get 3 stone into our bucket. Now, it's important to note that you do not have to take the action that your meeple lands on the action track. In other words, if I use this 6 die and I rolled all the way around to this position and I have no need for stone and I don't want to go ahead and do this because I want to do something else, there are other options. Instead of taking that action, you can choose to craft a tool. Of course, you have to meet the requirements of the tool you're trying to craft. And I'm currently trying to work my way towards creating a stone knife, which happens to need 3 stone. So what I just did was very beneficial. The other option you have is to play with your friend, and this allows you to basically move your meeple to positions to be better off for future moves using other unspent dice and not have to take an action. Instead, you can bump up the disc from 1 to 2 here, and this will continually move up, and at any point in time when you get into the rows that actually have resource rewards, you can choose to put the disc back down at the very beginning and gain the associated rewards that were next to where the disc was. So this is a way that your friend can do some work for you and help you out, and it also stops you from having to interact with the action track if you don't wish to. Now here's an up-close look at the stone knife that I am attempting to craft here. You'll see that I need 2 stars in order to pull this off. Well, taking a look at my unspent dice, I have a 4, which will give me 2 stars, so that's perfect. And then I have the 3 stone I need now, so I just need to go ahead and use a die and then not take the action after moving the meeple. I can choose to craft at that point, and we can get the stone knife created. Now, when choosing these unspent dice and the order in which you choose to spend them in, it's very important to take a look down here at this night row, which won't make much sense right now. They're all 1s, which are great results. I mean, you'd always love to have 1s in that bottom night row, but that really hurts you when you're going after actions. It doesn't give you much for movement and stuff. But as you can see, when dice start to move down from the positions you spent them in the future into these rows below, bad things can happen. You can have raids occur based on certain dice icons. So if we get a 5 or a 6 here, we have a raid coming in. If we get the weather die increasing, we end up going harsher on the weather side of things. So right now, if I choose to use my 4, it's going to end up in this slot, and later on, it's going to come down to this slot, which means it'll go from being sunny to rainy, which has implications on gameplay. So the order in which you use the dice that come from the top up here matters. I chose to use my 2 die, which is going to go into the second slot of usage. And as you can see, when it impacts the weather later on, it's going to keep things sunny, which is great. If I had chosen to use the 4, although that would allow me to craft the stone knife right now, the downside is we would be pushing our weather up, and that's not good. I'm going to leave that 4 for the raid department, as a 5 or a 6 is bad. A 4 is fine. So the order of that does matter. You can see it right there. So we've got the 2 in here. So at this point, we move the meeple 2. It has to be clockwise because this is not a 1 and it's not gray. So we're going to go 2 to here. The 2 provides us 1 star. 1 times the number of wood is just 1 wood. So we're going to go ahead and get a wood back, which is nice. Then I'll use my final die, a 4, and that's going to give us the ability to get 2 stars. We're going to be moving 4 on this track, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times this, being that it's 2 stars, is going to give us 2 food. But you know what? Instead of actually interacting with the action there, instead, I'm going to burn a wood to move 1 more space to actually go here. And this is going to allow us to get a certain movement based on stars. And as you can see right here, getting 2 stars, let's go for a little walk across the island. Now, when you move, you're only able to move 1 space. You cannot use both stars to move 2 spaces because, as you'll notice on the roads themselves, there's a star between each 2 points. So you'll see we're here, and if we want to go here, it's 1 star in terms of what we need to accomplish over there on the action side of the equation to get past this. So we got 2 stars, more than enough. We can hop over here, but guess what? We're still butting up against this divided dotted line here. We're still in rabbit territory. We have not moved into the deer area. That's where we're headed to hunt that deer. I've also placed a stone knife back here because we haven't actually crafted it yet, but that's something that I'm gunning for. Always keep in mind your friend being able to provide resources for you in times of need. You can move your meeple around the action track, choose not to take the given action, and instead move the disc, as I mentioned. Once things get up to that second or third position, you can choose to cash it in anytime during the afternoon to grab the resources, which can really help you pivot to go after certain things you're looking for. We are now heading into the evening portion, the third phase of the game. The darkness of the island is dangerous. You want to be prepared for rough weather and raids occurring. The very first thing we do is eat at night. We need to have food. If we do not have food, we have to spend one of our resource for health, which would knock off from here, which we have 5, would knock us down to 4. But thankfully, we do have food in here, so we'll lose 1, and we're A-okay there. We now move from eating into the weather penalty, but before we do that, let's talk about the major icons next to the slots for each of the 3 dice that have 1 pip. So we have 3 across, we go from left to right. Now this one here is a lightning bolt. In the final version, it will be a sand timer. It will represent time, and there's certain cards in the game that will actually mention this. So for example, the tool trap there in the bottom right shows that if that time has a value of a die that's either 3 or 5, you can go ahead and set a trap in order to actually get more food and some fur. So that's something to keep note of. This one otherwise isn't going to have any effect. So what you can essentially use this first slot as is a way to put high value dice in that are not going to hurt you, because as you can see from these other 2 slots, if you have a high value die in weather, it's going to equate to bad things. We'll talk about what bad things in a second. And a high value die in the raid category is definitely going to push those raids toward your way. So now you have a better appreciation for what this icon is around time. Now we move to the weather penalty. Very easy to resolve. Looking at the chart off to the right there, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And each of them are paired up in groups of 2. And it either has good weather, rainy weather, or cold weather. So in this case, we have a 1 there, so it's great weather. No effect whatsoever. But let's say hypothetically we had a 3 or a 4 in there, then we would lose a roof. So we would come here, and if we actually had a resource cube in here that denoted we had built a roof, that roof would be removed. If we don't have a roof, we take a health hit instead, which would come off of the 5 we have in here. And the worst case is that you have a 5 or 6 in this die, and you actually have to lose 2 roof tokens or cubes out of that area. If you don't have them, you instead lose health as well. So if I happen to have a 5 or a 6, then down here I would take a look. If I have nothing here for a roof, I'm taking 2 health hits. If I have 1 roof, I'm taking 1 health hit. And if I have both roofs in place, the roofs come off, but no health hit. Now we check our raid penalty, and this one's very easy to figure out because, again, if it's a 5 or 6 denoted by the iconography to the right of the die slot, then we are going to be having a raid occur, and in this case it would be rabbits, and the only raid they're going to be doing is going after our food. So as you can see in the bottom portion of the card, they would take a food away from us, but because we have a 1 in here, no raid occurs. And as I talked about before, that raid is all dependent on where you are on the island. So we're in an area right now where rabbits are predominant. We move into an area with deer. They will have a different hit against us. We can get into areas with all kinds of different creatures. As you can see at the very bottom of the card, you can see examples of all kinds of nasty raids that can occur dependent on which creature is in the area and when a raid triggers. We now move into dice movement. We can always tell where we're at in the night phase just by looking at the references right on the board themselves. And we've made it all the way to this right here. We're going to move each of the 3 dice right here into the spot below them. And so as you can now clearly see, because you understand how the night phase works, what you chose and in what order to slot in across the top when you're doing your actions really does matter when it comes around to the night phase in terms of what things you're going to have to deal with. So now what happens is we have the 3 yellow dice that came out of that bottom row. Now is going to be what we roll going into the morning phase on the next round. We don't have the gray die anymore, so the only way we can go in reverse on this action track is if we roll 1s. 1s allow you, when they're yellow, to go forward on the action track or backwards. And the very last thing we do in the night phase is we're going to move the disc, which is tracking the number of days, and we currently go down to 2, which doesn't have any effect, but you'll see certain other spaces will have an effect. In these cases, the ones coming up are going to increase the raid die by 1. If this was triggering right now, let's say hypothetically we're going from 2 to 3, we would be moving the raid die, which is currently at 4, up to 5, and that would put it in the 5 to 6 territory to trigger a raid in the coming night. So these effects are going to have negative consequences thrown at you and get increasingly tougher as the game goes on. But we're currently only in day 2. And now, my friends, you've seen a full round of play inside of Dieson Crusoe. At this point, we're going to pick up the speed of play as you now have an understanding as to how things flow and operate. And of course, there's nuances within. We'll run into those and explain them as we go. Let's try and push towards completing our objectives. Let's start off the morning on the second day with a dice roll, see what we get for our results. We have ourselves a 3, 4, 5. I placed the dice in position in ascending order. Also, not going to use any stone to re-roll anything here. I'm okay with what I've got. It should give me enough flexibility. It was a pretty good roll. So we're going to go ahead now and move this event disc, and it's based on it being 3. So we're going to move 3 around the track. That's going to take us here to our friend. And in this case, it ends up being a benefit for us, which is nice. We get to move the disc along the friend track 1 space, working its way up now, heading upwards on the card in the future towards the wood resources. My first unused die I'm going to use is the 5. I'm going to place it in the first slot. We're going to move 5 positions, going clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to this hunting option here. So we have power times by the number of stars. As a 5, we're going to get 2 stars. And just so you know, when we go on a hunt, we also have our hunter card here, our character card, which also shows a power on it. So we have 2 stars coming into the equation times the power, and that's going to be a total of 2, and then plus 1 for what's on our character card. So we have 3 power overall going up against whatever we're hunting based on the area we're in, and we're inside an area with rabbits, and those rabbits have a power requirement of 2. So nice and easy this time around. You can see the requirements for the hunt up top, 2 power needed. And as I mentioned before, we got 2 stars, which equate to power. And we've got 1 here, so we have 3. We have more than enough. We got ourselves 1 food resource and 1 fur resource. And this again is going to help us towards getting the requirements for the rope we need. Next die is going to be a 4, which will allow us to move around this 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's going to allow us to move a space. A 4 nets us 2 stars, and if we take a look at the requirement to traverse from where we are into the new space here, it's 1 star, so we easily can do this. We move into the new space and take some wood. So I've added a wood resource to my pile. Also worth noting, we are now in deer territory, which is where we need to be in order to get that objective completed. We just need to hunt one successfully. Now it's time to use our final die. The final die will end up in the 3rd slot, allowing me to move 3 spaces. So I've gone from here to here. This allows me to take an action if I wish to spend stone and wood to create fences. But I don't want to do that right now. I've got another plan in mind. I'm going to choose to spend a food to increase the die number to allow me to get more stars off of it. So instead of it being a 3, I've spent 1 food placed right here for now, but it'll be removed. It's going to become a 4, which I don't have to change the die face whatsoever. Just remember it's a 4. Take a look at the table. You now have 2 stars. It got me from that category of 1 star to 2 star. And this is good for me because I need 2 stars if I wish to do another action other than the one I'm standing on, which is to craft. And I'm going to choose to craft the stone knife. So I'm taking that craft action as it denotes right here. I got 2 stars, and I'm going to use all 3 of my stones, and that allows me to take the stone knife. I'll actually place this right here, and as you can see, this also increases my power as well. And as you'd expect from a tool, it states right on it the benefit you gain from having it. So not only do I go up in power, which is nice overall, but during the daytime, when I'm taking a hunting action, then I'm going to gain an additional fur out of the hunt that I go after. Moving into the night phase, first thing to resolve is lose a food or lose a health. So we're losing a food. Next up is the weather, and the weather die is a 2, which means sunny weather, no effect, thank goodness. Moving on to the raid, it's a 4. We are still safe there, so we had a nice night overall. And the dice shift out that we're in positions, and the new ones come down. That's the end of another day, so we move the disc to the next day, and we're going to impact the raid die. It's going to increase by 1. All that's needed to do is take a look at the raid die and uptick it by 1. In this case, it goes from 3 to 4, but that won't have any future impact when we have to resolve this, as it's not a 5 or a 6, so that's good. I left that little bit of wiggle room so we don't have a negative impact, but if I had of, during the actions phase, chosen to place the 4 die in the 3rd slot over here, it would have come down as a 4, uptick to a 5, and that would have given us problems in the future with a raid. Raid, in this case being the rabbit, will go after our food, and the fact we don't have much food is not good because it would go straight after our health. Day 3 begins. We roll our 3 dice to begin the morning. Let's see how we do. We got ourselves a 2, 3, 4. We're getting lots of sequential numbers here in perfect order. Oh, now this is definitely an interesting result because the 2 right here in this very first slot is going to impact the event here as normal. It's going to go up to this position, which is a +2 on the weather die, which is really bad. That's going to jump this thing up to a 6. So the weather overnight changed from just rain into full-on freezing cold. And guess what? We don't have much for a shelter, so this doesn't bode well for us. Before I use my dice and take my actions, I want to talk about two things, one being the roof. So if you build up your roof, it's going to help you when the weather gets really bad. So as you can see, that is not something I've really focused on. It's probably going to come back to hurt me unless I can do something about it right now. Now the fences are something else you can build up. The roof ties into the weather, whereas the fences ties into the raids. And the creatures that are coming after you can be defended using fences. So you can use and destroy your fences rather than having them hit you for health. But the rabbits, however, go after the food, and there is no note on the actual card that states the fence will defend against the rabbit. I'm assuming the rabbits can skirt right through fences. They'll go after your food regardless of whether you build fences or not. And just so you can visually see when a raid occurs that fences can be used instead of taking health hits or potential food hits. These creatures are going to be the ones that can be defended by using fences. You'll see you can potentially run into other individuals on this island that fences are not going to help with. And then of course the rabbit, which is this one right here, also same situation, going after food, and it's just going to go straight for that food. Now it is worth mentioning when we traversed from the rabbit area into the area with deer, I should have swapped out the card. So you go into this area deck, you'd find the deer and place that one face up next to the game board, and the rabbit one can go back into the area deck. You only need to be visibly showing the actual creatures in the areas that you are standing inside of. To visually show you this, when I was back in this location here and I traversed over the white dotted line from the rabbit area into the deer area, at that point this rabbit can go back in the area deck, and you just go ahead and find the deer card, placing it face up at the very top, because now this is what you'll be hunting, and also this is what the raids will look like going forward. Seeing as I have a nice fancy stone knife and we're now inside of deer territory, why don't we go and try and hunt a deer? I brought the deer card on camera, so you can see the requirement is 3 power to take it out. It's going to provide 2 food and 2 fur, which would be majorly beneficial for us. So checking out this right here, we got ourselves a usage of this 2, which gives us 1 star. That star is a power in essence. So we have 1 power, and then we have an additional power off of this card right here, and another one off the stone knife. So thanks to building that stone knife, we had enough to be able to push forward and take out the deer. Now, if we didn't have the stone knife, we just have to use a result from one of our dice that would actually push us up on the stars to increase how much power we had out of that result first. But in this case, didn't need to. We could use a really low value die to pull it off. So I've also taken 2 food and 2 fur, and that is going to complete the hunting of the deer. We now need to make a rope. So we need 2 fur, which we currently have. We need 2 wood. We do not have that, so maybe that's something to focus on next. And we need 1 food. We are very close. Also want to mention I added another fur into this area because it says +1 fur when using the stone knife when you do a hunt, which I did successfully against the deer. The deer gave me 2, and the stone knife gave me an additional 1. I think what we need to focus on is making sure we can get the roof up in place to make sure we don't take too many hits during the upcoming cold weather. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to backtrack 3 using the gray die. We're going to place this die right here, allowing us to go counterclockwise as well as clockwise. I'm going to go back 3 positions. So we're going to choose to go the clockwise route. It's going to take us here, and based on the 3, that'll be 1 star. So we're going to gain ourselves 1 stone. I'm going to use my final die here to go 4. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4, and this states we can spend a fur and a wood in order to get some of the roof going. 1 leather and 1 wood allows us to build 2 layers of a roof, which is perfect for what we have coming up in the near future. The evening now comes and we need to consume some food, which we do have, so we'll take 1 away to avoid taking a health hit. And this is where things get nasty, but thanks to us building the 2 layers of roofs, we have the ability to withstand the cold. With a 6 here, we're going to take 2 hits to our roof. It's going to destroy the entire thing, but it keeps us healthy and we don't take any damage. And finally, the raid is not going to trigger as it's not a 5 or a 6, so that's good news. Let's move the dice down and take our new handed dice for the next morning. The dice are in position. Let's advance the day track. Everything we do here has to be done within 6 days, and time is ticking onwards. Starting off another morning, let's roll the dice and see how the event track's going to pan out. We got ourselves a 1, 6, and 5. And remember, at this point, we can manipulate the dice if we want. I'm going to do it. I'm going to spend my stone in order to reroll up to 3 dice. I'm rerolling all 3 of these. Let's see how we do on the next roll. We got a 5, 5, and a 6. Slotting them all in. Let's find out what happens in the event track. Moving the disc 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is going to bring it around to our friend who's going to go up on the tier. And this is great because it's actually next to a wood resource. And when we get into the afternoon, I can go ahead at any time there and actually cash that in for 1 wood. As you can see, that dice roll certainly was not a good one for me, as it's going to put some seriously high-value dice in this equation, which eventually drop down into the raid and weather and have lots of nasty effects, but I think I can pull out the victory before things go south. So what I'm going to do here is place the first one in this slot and allow me to move 6, and it has to be clockwise, so it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm not going to bother building any fences at this point. I'm going to interact with my friend here. We're going to uptick this disc to the highest spot, and at any time I can cash this in. So I'm going to drop this down to the bottom, and I'm going to get 2 wood. It's not looking bad for us at all at this point, because we now have 2 fur, 2 wood, and 1 food, and we have such high die results, we're able to get some serious stars. So on the second action here, I'm going to go ahead and put it in place, and we're going to do a craft. I selected my second die, slotted it in, and I've moved my meeple 5. I'm not going to take the action here. Instead, I'm going to craft. I'm going to craft this right here with a 5 result. It's going to give me 2 stars. I'm going to uptick this value as if it was a 6 by spending a health. You can see here, by spending a health, you can increase a die by 1. So this is going to drop down to 4 total health. So I'm taking that health hit in order to boost this up, which is worth it as we're getting to the end of the game here. And that's going to allow me to get 3 stars, which allows me to successfully craft this as I use 2 fur, 1 food, and 2 wood. And just like that, I've completed my second objective. And the moment that you've completed the objectives on the quest, as depicted up here on the quest card for Survive, which was to hunt a deer and to make a rope, you finish the game with a victory. And that's going to do it, my friends. You've seen the full gameplay of how this thing flows and operates. From this point forward, you can really dive in and dig in to quest 2 through to 5. You can also come back and play this quest 1 all over again. You can make things difficult on yourself by increasing the difficulty, like having less health out of the gates. You can also run into situations where you'll play this and you'll be health hit from the very beginning. I was lucky that I was able to avoid any of it that was done by the game itself. But I can tell you from plays off camera, I have been hit before, and heavily. And you're going to notice as you go into this one, it is not forgiving. There will be moments where you're going to get absolutely hounded, and especially some of the quests that go for longer periods of time are going to start pushing the day track up, and the actual jump up in the nastiness is going to really start to increase. You can see here, you're not only messing with the raid die, but also the weather die at times, and then they go from being +1s to 2s at certain points, and things just really escalate. But you have that beginning portion to kind of get your feet wet and establish yourself, because for what's coming to Survive, it's going to be a whole bunch of wrenches coming your way. So hopefully this helps you make an informed decision on the Game Found campaign for February 13th. And I truly believe that Dieson Crusoe will fit very well into solo gamers' libraries. I'm very impressed myself and can't wait for the final edition of this one. I think it's a worthy addition to my collection as a small box, small footprint survival game with dice placement at its heart. Thank you guys so much, and as always, keep on rolling solo.